Welcome to Life and Leadership Unfiltered. My name is Charlene Burke, your leadership coach. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Nancy Laurenson, is a national board certified health and wellness coach and a clinical exercise physiologist with more than 30 years of experience in healthcare, where she has designed, facilitated, and managed programs and workshops that address chronic disease management, rehabilitation, and physical injury, as well as cognitive and mental health issues. Nancy received her master's degree in human and applied physiology from King's College London and trained as a certified integrative health coach at Duke Integrative Medicine's Integrative Health Coaching Program. In her work as a coach, Nancy has experienced firsthand the transformation that comes bringing health coaching together with lifestyle medicine and behavior change, focusing on physical activity, movements, balanced nutrition, social, group support, stress management therapies, and healing elements as part of an overall treatment program. Please help me welcome the powerful Nancy. We're going to learn from her about self-care and wellness. How are you doing?
I'm great today. Thank you. It's sunny here. You can see the sun's pouring in, and it's a lovely day
It's
in
a lovely
California.
day. Yeah, and you're a lovely person. So
Oh,
it's a
thank you
perfect.
for inviting me. Thank you for inviting
Oh,
me.
you're welcome. Thank you. So the topic for today really is self-care and wellness. And I feel like you're the expert in that department. Are you not?
That word expert is always an interesting one. Let's put it this way. I certainly try to work at it because you have to do that from your own perspective. You have to walk that talk. And I get the opportunity and the honor of working with people who are working on that. So it gives me a lot of experience.
It's similar to a leadership practice. There's not a destination that you're completely the optimal leader, all the skill sets is like to the top. No, there's always growth. There's always things to work on. So it's a continued practice, just like a sports, anybody who plays sports and professional level, they go out there and every day and pound those sand, whatever it is that they do, they continue to practice.
They do. So here
Yeah.
we are. Thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I want to ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how important is self-care in maintaining our overall wellness, especially in leadership effectiveness and in address the effectiveness of leadership and maybe just life in general?
Well, if you take it just as a life in general and what we need to do every day, it's kind of a bottom line kind of health way of being. If you don't take care of yourself, you're going to suffer from whether it's an emotional or mental health or physical impairments or challenges that really make it difficult then to kind of function and be in the world. And however you are in your personal and private life then gets transposed to what you bring as a leader. And so it is literally the cornerstone of how we operate this idea of self-care. And, there's a lot of different elements to self-care, what you can do, what helps. And it's very individualized. What works for one person may or may not work for another person. But there's certainly some good tenets that we know about that help
Yeah,
and push forward, this idea of taking care of yourself.
I believe it impacts how we show up, right?
Mm.
Down to our mood. So I really want to concretely clarify what that is and how it impacts us day to day, because I feel like some of the people, me included, we don't fix it until it's broken. So what does that feel like to be broken when we're falling short in self-care and wellness?
Does it feel like it feels like your world is not kind of working well, whether it's a relationship or it's a team or whatever? You show up tired, you perhaps show up irritated, you are forgetting things, you aren't engaging well in your conversations, you aren't perhaps being responsible. So I think self-care is vital. It's vital for us to actually be the best person and to bring forth the best person. So it's not an indulgence. I think oftentimes people think of self-care as this thing that I don't have time to indulge in that. Comeback or the idea to think about is I don't have the opportunity not to actually take care of myself.
Yeah.
That if I don't do that, I will not be able to function. And it shifts the language and the thoughts. And perhaps that's a negative way of looking at it. So then a positive way and a positive thought would be, how do I bring my best self forward for my family, for myself, for my team, for my friends? And you then start to engage in all the different practices that we know can be helpful.
This is what I do keep saying with my clients. I say, because I feel like you address it like self-care. Perhaps it's like something that's selfish. But I always say self-care, selfish is self-care, or vice versa, right? You have to really take responsibility for your own well-being. I mean, I think that's essential, and you laid it out. It's so foundational in just even you, I think you said mood, right? And how you show up and how you interact,
Yeah.
let alone being creative and solving the bigger problems of life.
I really think you cannot be creative, you cannot be passionate, you cannot be setting goals and working on tasks and kind of action steps to get to those goals unless you're taking care of yourself. Something's going to fall through. And often it's a big crash, you know. So the idea that taking care of yourself, it used to be this idea of it was like a spa thing that women did, that we
I
went off
love,
and went
I
to the
still
spa
love.
for the day. And that is a great way to take care of yourself. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? It's the 1 minute of taking time to get up, walk out of the room, take a deep breath, maybe sit and take several deep breaths, go for a walk around, you know, walk up and down the stairs, come back and reorient yourself. It's as simple as that 1 to 2 or 5 minute break.
Mhm.
And that's something we can all find time for.
Yeah, it sounds like you might be debunking some of the myths about self-care, right?
Mm.
So what are some of the common misconception about self-care? And you already are debunking them by even just, hey, who does not have time for 1 minute? 1 minute. That scrolling, social media scrolling. What else could you do besides that, right?
I think time is one of the key ones because if you think of self-care as addressing your nutrition, addressing how you move in the world, whether that's physical activity, it's a exercise regimen, it's getting out in nature and walking, all those ways that our body moves. We are moving animals. Our body wants and likes to move. And if it doesn't, it is not happy. So whether it's that element or eating well, so that you don't have sugar highs and lows. You know, you come to work depleted already, you know, where you have to get on that coffee fix to even function. Not that we don't all like maybe a cup of coffee or tea in the morning, but it's different from really enjoying it and liking it and absolutely not being able to function without it. There's a difference there. To getting your sleep, getting that quality of sleep. So those are the things that are so important. And time becomes one of those things that we all think that we do not have time for it. This is that none of us really have that much time. We have to do a lot of different things to make that time happen, you know.
Wow.
And you sometimes need that minute. You sometimes need 5 minutes. You can schedule your appointment with yourself to go for that walk. You can have the buzzer or the technology that is useful in this case to say, oh, time to get up. It's telling me I need to move, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Actually, that idea of leveraging the technology for the good, because oftentimes it's very distracting. And also, the one thing that I do talk about is like switching tasks, right?
Mm.
It's our brain, it's unfair to our brain, or very draining for our brain when I say unfair, from switching one task, concentrated task, and then to another task without having a switch, a time of pause, even for 30 seconds, and that breather, maybe that 1 minute walk that you're talking about,
Right.
no matter how busy.
Mm.
What is it about in us? Like, I should be walking now. I feel like my body needs to like walk away, but then,
We don't. And it's because of a number of excuses, right? From I don't have the time to I need to get this out to the feeling that we can put it off. I'll do it later, which is very hard to make sure that happens. We also don't do it because new habits, if it's not a habit of ours to get up and maybe take those breaks, are very hard to form. And we could talk about habit forming and how you make things more routine or bring in good habits. But It's hard because it's not a habit. We often think it's because we don't have good willpower to get up and do it. And that idea of willpower has been debunked. It's not about willpower. It's about all the other things that go on in our brain that don't help us focus in and make that decision so easily. There's then just the idea of falling back into negative self-talk. I missed it yesterday. I just can't do it. I'm a failure at this, and you might not even think that consciously. It might be a subconscious voice that's kind of in the back that just keeps you from doing these simple, easy self-care, practices that can actually build up, they can stack, they can start to become part of your life. But you have to get rid of the mind chatter that says, I can't do it, or I'll do it later. And our minds are very powerful. If we believe we can't do it, we will not be doing it.
That is true. Right, right.
Mhm.
And so I think some of the things that can counteract too is that commitment, right? And I see this in people who work out, for example, the bodybuilders. I know a few of my family members. No matter what, rain or shine. And the ones that have bulked up, I've seen they do not at all compromise their commitment to their health. It's such a mindset, like you said, because they are just, I mean,
Yeah.
so committed. And I imagine they have other things going on in life, the other options that they don't have to do it now. But there's just this few that I see, some of my family members are just so committed. I'm in awe of their commitment to, there's no compromising their get up at 3 a.m. if need be, and really stick to their routine, of eating. So I think that commitment piece would you think it could overcome the chatter? So you commit before?
I think it goes beyond that, and you have to take a step back. And I think we have to understand what is whole importance around self-care. We have to ask ourselves, what do we want for ourselves? And if we can start to say, how I want to be, look, feel, act in the world, this is who I am. I'm vibrant, active, emotionally, hopefully, and cognitively aware person for my team. I want to be a good listener. I want to communicate well. I want to model behavior I want back from my team. If we can start to create this vision of who we are and the meaning behind why we want to be like that, I think the first thing. It's more than saying, oh, I want to go out and run a marathon, or I want to get up and exercise or go to the gym at 3 o'clock every morning. That is like a specific goal, a smart goal. But I think you can lose those goals. They shift a lot. Something gets in the way where you really can't do that. You get injured, then you can't go to the gym. So who are you after that? So I think it comes back to defining, who am I? What do I want in this world? How do I want to be and present myself? And from there, you get to then start to say, what's the road and the path that's going to take me to that? Am I going to be this person who, really commits to exercise? And then how do I do that? I'm going to eat this way. I'm going to sleep this way. I'm going to try to be this type of a person. And you get to start to think about the ways you want to create and make that happen and set routines and plan it. But if you do not have almost like a higher reason for why you want to go there, I think it can get lost. So you're trying to create a sustainable lifestyle behavior change, that this is just who I am. When I walk to the store and shop, I don't go down those aisles that have junk food and sweets. I mean, I just don't even go down them anymore because that's not the food I eat. And it's not a hard choice because I've been working at it for a long time and that food doesn't taste good anymore, for example. In fact, I don't even want it. I don't crave that. So it's a slow, simple, one step at a time, but I think you always come back to redefining, how do I want to walk and be in this world?
There's such purposeful intentionality and creativeness in not just like the one thing, the goal, okay, I want to run a marathon. You're talking about who you are as an identity,
Absolutely.
I'm a fit person. I want to be a fit person. I'm going to keep practicing and doing the things so that I am fit. And so I really love that incorporating part of your identity, not just like part-time, different goal that may be sustainable in that one specific time, but then not really who you are after that. So I like that incorporation of your own, of who you are and identity. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that works well. I have seen it with, so many of the wonderful clients and people I've worked with. I've seen that happen as they realign who they want to be. There is an intentionality and a purpose. And then what happens is that it makes it so that when they're more aligned with this is who I want to be, there might be more than one path forward. And for those people who are not as rigid or maybe as committed in one area, like getting up as your family members are to a very specific routine, it allows for flexibility. It allows for saying, oh, this path isn't working, but I'm going to try this path or new interests coming in. Or you move to a new part of the world and you can't do what you used to do. So you try something different and new, but you haven't lost who you really are. You haven't lost that you want to be that person who shows up in a particular way. You just might now work at that person and being who you are in a different way. And that can be exciting and fun. It can also be terrifying because it's maybe change. But because change is so much a part of who we are, it does allow for flexibility and the plan Bs and the plan Cs in the world to come forward when our typical routine isn't possible for whatever reason.
I actually love that. That's the complexity of life, like how other people influences us. I have to say. So the way I am, I have a very huge junk drawer that I absolutely love. I love chips and cookies, specific kind of cookies and lots of salty things. And I feel this, it's really big. It's people when they open it and it's like, wow, you guys have a lot of junk food. So my thing was because I have self-control, right? I don't have to eat a whole bag of chips. I can eat a little bit, and that's just how I am. Like I can control it. Whereas the person I'm living with, my spouse, he doesn't necessarily like the chips. But for example, if we have, and I don't like ice cream that much, but once in a while I'll indulge in ice cream. But for him, if it's in the house, he'll eat the whole thing. And it
Yes.
used to be a huge push, tug, or push and pull, or whatever, however you call that. But I was like, you're going to need to have some self-control because I have control. You're going to need to have some self-control. And I used to always just stand firmly, but it never really worked. And you mentioned earlier, willpower, you can't rely on wellness, self-care, control of some certain junk food. And I finally learned, it took me a while, I finally learned that we need to help each other, right? We need to help, be responsible for each other's health, be accountable for each other's health. Because I used to say, hey, you can stop you take care of you, you're an adult. So I think that's the key thing too, and who you're with that can be compassionate and empathetic, and which eventually arrived at that area in that space where, okay, I'm going to help myself. It also helps our relationship because
Absolutely.
we don't have to argue about this thing and him being disappointed that I'm filling this junk drawer and then he can't help himself. So it brings us closer together and compromise on what we have in our household.
You really point out a very classic situation I come into contact with in terms of the clients I see. So many of them are trying to really shift the way they eat, what they eat, their relationship to food, how they can look at this in a long-term way, especially because many of them are kind of struggling with a chronic disease, often heart disease, where they really do need to shift over from a medical perspective and best practice of what we know in the research world. And so for them, having their spouse or partner or family on board to be a support for them is incredibly important. And what you've just described is some of the things that certainly, marriages and partners come to an agreement on and saying, how can I support you? And so often when one person has something that's kind of dictating, either it's a behavior or a pattern of how they approach or eat food. If their partner is doing something that's not serving them, then it just doesn't work. If you can both start to change, what you find out is maybe not having the junk drawer is also helpful, for example, for you as well. And so what can you put in that junk drawer perhaps my question is, that's actually healthy and nutritious and really yummy, because there's a lot of that too. Maybe that's, some of the shifts and changes, but it is a back and forth of what we can do. None of us do this perfectly. So the idea is, how do we go about life being our best imperfect self and accepting that with compassion, forgiveness, really understanding and saying, tomorrow I will do better, or just starting right now, I will take a different perspective or a different path, because we can always come back. The idea is to make sure we don't let, when self-care drops to the side, that lapse maybe in what's happening because of life getting in the way. We could talk about all the things about life and work getting in the way. So we lapse. So how do you make that not become a relapse? Something where you really stop altogether. There's a lot of strategies you can do to just help somebody in that respect too. Just being observant, being mindful, being aware, this is a lapse. Tonight, I ate something I didn't really want to eat. Okay, what was I doing? What was I feeling? What was the reasons for that? If you get to ask yourself that, you can say, oh yeah, I was bored. I was back in front of the telly again, watching telly with whatever, and it was just an urge and I could not stop it. So if you get to look at that in that way, you get to say, well, what is it that I know about myself? What would be helpful? Can I get rid of that bag of popcorn or chips or something that I don't want in the house? Can I next time really ask a partner to support me? Or can I make sure that I'm very aware that it can happen, so I have a healthy snack and I bring that to the television with me? Things like that. So that's where our self-care is always about juggling. It's always about really reevaluating it. And you cannot do that unless you're really aware and you start to be mindful about what you're doing. And again, I wrap that all in kindness and compassion.
It's a work in progress, just like life, it sounds like.
Oh.
And by the way, my junk drawer is probably a third or a little bit more than a third of protein bars, believe it
Mm.
or not. So lots of plant protein bars, nuts, and yeah, there's still some junk there, but it's a healthier junk drawer with I can just pull my junk drawer out. I have a protein bar and I feel like not so bad, indulging. Because
Wow.
some of those healthy bars are tasting pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good workaround. It's fun to find the solutions, isn't it? Because being creative, because that's very creative, is also part of this. Widen my lens in life, really look at a different perspective around this. And I'm going to ask you, was it hard for you to change your junk drawer?
Was it hard?
Yes, was it hard? Was it difficult?
Not really, because I think the support, my husband and I agreed that we were going to do that.
Mhm.
We kept talking about it and talking about it because it was kind of when people come to the house, look at that bottom drawer. There's like so big. And they're like, whoa. So
Mhm.
part of it is fun. I think part of it is I really love when people come in and then they can enjoy some snacks and things like that. And now there's some healthy snacks too. So I think for us, modifying that, it was slow. And I didn't even really know until I didn't even really assess what was in there until you mentioned, like, what's in that junk drawer now? And so I thought about it. I was like, oh, yeah, actually, it's healthier, but I still call it my junk drawer. The one thing you did point out that there
Mhm.
was a time younger that when I would get sad and have anxiety and kind of going my way, angst and youth, a lot of struggles, didn't really have a coping mechanism to things. For the most time, there was like the sadness or anxiety that was always ruling my life. And so it
Mm.
looked like I was healthy. Anytime that I had happiness in my life, that I could sustain happiness for a while, I happy eat. And so I am a happy eater and I do not eat when I'm sad. And so
Mm.
for my younger days, that was good but I didn't consider myself an emotionally eater until I found out when I'm happy, I eat. I'm like, well, that's still emotional. I reject food when I'm sad, but I eat. And so I really had to manage when I met my husband. I'm very happy. my life is regularly happy. Of course, I have anxiety here and there and stress just like anybody else. But the eating was just like I'm a happy eater, and then here goes 10 pounds, here goes 20 pounds. It keeps adding up because like I'm happy, let's eat together and be merry, right? And so I really had to adapt and change. And I think that's what you said about changing and adapting. And
Mm.
I was kind of lazy, I guess. Like, my metabolism will eventually catch up, and lying to myself and stuff like that. It'll eventually
Yeah.
take care of myself, but with no intentional practice or anything. But now I started to, and I finally happy to report to you, Nancy, that I finally got it. I got it figured out where I feel like I'm having a healthier relationships with emotional eating.
That's fantastic. What a lovely story of really transcending. But what I heard from that was so interesting is how you became very aware of what your relationship was around food and when you eat, what are sometimes we call those triggers for when we eat, but that often has a wrong connotation or a negative connotation. So just what is it and how is it and when is it that you eat and what are you feeling? What are you experiencing? Are you alone? Are you with friends? Are you in a happy situation? Are you eating because you're very anxious or you're very depressed or you're very sad? So it runs the whole spectrum of when people and how people eat. And just trying to get in tune with yourself in a very kind of realistic way. You just get to look at that and say, again, who is it that I want to be? What do I want to have? What kind of relationship? And just start slowly think about working towards that. I think it helps when someone's really struggling with that to work with somebody, in the coaching world or somebody who really understands behavior around food. Sounds like you were really able to take your own training and help yourself there, which is really great. But I think it's always fantastic opportunity then to ask for support and help
Mhm.
and get that. I don't want to gate that can be really important. I think that's why we as coaches are here to be that partner for somebody and help them as they face this challenge and to not minimize how long it takes. It takes a long time. It
Yes,
takes a long time
it
because
did.
these are new ways of being and thinking, and we don't change quickly as human beings. So,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah,
But we have more success as on our side when we have a coach, right? Because
we do.
honestly, if I had a coach, if I was working with you, I would have been been able to like kind of decrease the expanded time for me to
Mm,
change because it took me a lot. That journey was a long time, years
mm,
and years and years of realizing and I'm kind of knowing, but really not doing anything about it. Whereas if a coach not only bring self-awareness as you would, but then I said, okay, so now that you know, what are you going to do with what you know, right? It's
mm,
about taking actions with what you know.
yeah.
And not to say, like, I know self-care, wellness, like food, it impacts different areas, obviously, like anxiety. What do you
Mm.
think that are some of the role that self-care plays into emotional well-being or anxiety?
Well, self-care is again vital from an anxiety point of view. And I think from an anxiety, it's always sitting back and really coming into a quiet space to say, how am I feeling? What's going on? Sometimes anxieties, we know we have it because we might have a very extreme case or we get very noticeably anxious about something. But I think anxiety can lurk in the background. And we might not even know that our behaviors or a way of being, especially if we come across, let's say, in a controlling way, might be masking an anxiety. So I think it's always an interesting thing to really have those friends and support structures to talk about and say, I'm feeling this way. What does it look like to you when I'm acting like this? And somebody can say, yeah, it seems like you're being this, and you can say, wow. So I think anxiety really is one of those things that's easily not addressed. When we can sit and try to determine how it is we are by just maybe breathing into it. We could even do a simple exercise to say, am I anxious right now? By sitting there, just sitting down, taking that a breath in, maybe doing 4 beats, a breath in for 4, and then slowly maybe letting it out for 6. Then doing that again. Maybe you increase it to 7 or 8 on the exhale. Maybe you add a pause after you breathe in and a pause after you exhale. Just notice what our breathing patterns are. Our breath doesn't really lie to us often. It can really expose how anxious we are. So just taking a moment to sit there and breathe, whether we're in the car, you can always breathe in the car, whether you're at your desk, whether you're walking, and any task you do, you get to say, oh, let me check in with my breath.
That's
How
so
feeling?
interesting. I've never heard
Mhm.
of that before. How our breath
Mhm.
tells the story. I
It
often
can.
say breathe, breathe, because oftentimes I hold my breath, but I just tell myself to breathe. Can you say more about that? That is so interesting that our breath tells us story.
Well, it can as we become aware of things. I notice, I'll be honest, my daughter is the one, Cara, if you hear this, I'm giving you credit for this, but she would say to me, Mom, you seem really anxious about this. I'm like, no, I'm not anxious. I do all this meditation. It's so funny. And I really had to hear that and listen to it and realize she was right. I was anxious in some of these different ways that I thought by doing something else, I was kind of doing a good job of covering it up. And now, when I'm getting that way, if I'm at home where I find my anxiety going down, it's usually around a deadline or getting out to somewhere or thinking about the to-do list that we all have. I go in, I try to breathe or I go into my garden. As soon as I go into my garden and I look at my plants and I talk to them and say, okay, what do I want to do? I just go over and I start to, prune a little bit of this, I clean a little bit of that up. I find that's where I get into flow, I lose track, and I become one at the world. So I'm ever so grateful for my garden. And I think for all of us, if we can find some place where we can go, or we can walk, or we can sit, or we can read, or we can paint, or we can play music or listen to music, sometimes just getting into a state where we can actually just allow, that's very helpful. And then sometimes you can just breathe. And I'll go in the garden, I'll start to do my breathing. And for me, I like to do box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. Breathe in for 4, and obviously the box is the 4. Now, you can do lots of variations on that. In yoga classes, I've learned lots of other different forms of breathing. So there's many different ways you might breathe in a little bit longer for 6 breaths if you can, and then just slowly let it out for 8. That's another way. You can do it through more pursed lips. There's ways that you can allow, but it's mostly about just slowing down, pausing in life, allowing our breath to be our teacher. Where are we at? And there's any number of ways, and lots of great books out there that talk about breathing and can give guidance on it. But if you just want to start and just do the most simple form of anything, it can be really helpful. A good story, I was working at the VA, and I had the true honor and privilege of working with veterans who come back from the Iran-Iraq war. And some of them have been badly injured. And I was working with a young man who was quite incredible in his ability to come back and to face a lot of adversity. When I met with him and I was working there as a health coach, noticed in his medical records that he had been learning to do some yoga and to do meditation. And I asked him, how was that going? Was he still doing that as a way of stress management? And he said, no, he wasn't. And I said, oh, can you tell me more? And he did tell me, he said, well, he basically wasn't doing it any longer because he didn't have a class. He didn't have a teacher. And I thought, wow. And I said, so it sounds like it was really worked for you. He goes, oh, it worked great. I said, would you like to just do a little bit right now and practice? So we just did some simple breathing techniques. We talked about breathing, breath, meditation, and basically helping to give him the skills and tools that he was the teacher, learning to fish, you know. And he went away, decided he wanted to really try it out. And he thought he'd try to do it every day and take off a big, big action step right towards stress management. And when he came back 2 weeks later, when I asked him how it was going, he said, well, it's going great. And I said, so how often are you meditating? Tell me more about it. And he said, well, I'm doing it every day. And I said, wow, every day. That's incredible. How long? Well, 30 minutes. I said, 30 minutes every day. Oh,
Wow.
I thought, And I said, and he looked at me and I said, well, you have to understand that is an amazing accomplishment. And more than many of us could actually do. You bit off a big thing and you're doing it. And I'd love to hear what is your secret behind it. What is it that's allowing you to do this? And he looked at me and says, Nancy, I'm a Marine. Marines do what they say they're going to do. And I thought, wow, what a great lesson for me. Not to ever underscore when somebody really wants to, but he was like, I decided to take this on and I'm going to do it. For most of us, it's not that easy. He was this was a real challenge for him. I think probably his previous long time at Walter Reed had given him a very good foundation. So once he realized he could take the responsibility and go forward, it was very possible for him, and he showed that. So I think life is a surprise. I think we
Great
sometimes
surprise.
surprise ourselves about what we can take on and do very easily. And equally, what for all of us, we will have our challenges. We might maybe be able to eat well or exercise well, but we don't, you know, stress well, or we do well on the stress management side, but our challenge is getting up and moving. None of us have this down where we just can tick off every
Oh,
box.
really?
Like you said, we're a work in progress, but I think it's always exciting to know that we can do this. We can find ways. We just come back to saying again, what is my day like? I mean, what do I want to set out for my intentions? Because I have a vision, I have a purpose, and I know who I want to be in this world.
It's like that identity again with that Marine.
Mhm.
Part of being a Marine, this is who I am, right? He
Absolutely.
grabbed on that like a
Yeah.
that's
And
wonderful.
I stick with my word. And so for him, his word was very much something that meant a huge amount. His whole integrity was bound up in doing that.
So important to have those anxiety interventions, as you said, right?
Mm.
Different things. The interventions really help to curb and minimize perhaps anxiety. And so I'm really gonna, my takeaway, Nancy, so far
Mm.
is that interventions and calling
Mm.
them interventions. I'm very much into self-care, and it's a battle, right, that I fight for myself, for the health of me and my family and my husband. And so I love to think of it that way. I feel like that's a shift for me from our conversation so far. So thanks for sharing that story.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a journey that we're all on. I think we cannot escape the fact, especially from a personal relationship and our own health, how vital this is. But boy, taking that out to your teams, if you are able to model this self-care, you become that amazing mentor. You become that person that's not afraid to say, I made a mistake. You're not afraid to change direction. You can actually become more innovative and creative and more productive because you're taking care of yourself. You have the right energy. And there is just not a part of how we show up as a leader. And of course, we're all leaders, aren't we? Whether we're a leader in our home, we're a leader in our community, we're a leader at school, we're a leader, however. So we get to take that and always model it, but especially for, the leaders who are working in a business environment that's pretty tough these days, just knowing that you can actually ask your team to help you. You can say, hey, what about a walk and talk? What about if we all make taking care of ourselves really important so that we can get this difficult project done?
Yeah.
Just
Like,
think of the positivity that could go forward. And,
interestingly, like we're human beings love hacks, right? We hack
mm,
into
yeah,
innovative things, right? We want life that hack. And the one thing that's never changed, I feel like eating healthy and exercising, that there's no hack to it, right? I guess we
no.
could simplify it, right? But skipping that, right? Taking the vitamin for weight loss or taking supplements for optimal health. But does it ever like change that, okay, I don't need to exercise anymore and I don't really need to eat healthy that much anymore because I have all this
I
life
don't
hack?
think so. I can't put it on the back shelf, any of those, and say I'll reach for it later. You can't store good exercise and you can't store good nutrition. So I guess really what I would really suggest and implore that people find is a way of being that gives them the health they want. Taking all the good advice, and there's a lot of good scientists and science out there about how to eat well and how to live well and how to find work-life balance and how to move, especially when you are in these very difficult time frames. If you're a working person and you have kids at home, my gosh, your time is really, really even more, precious and confined and given over to other people. How do you find that in the day? That's where you can maybe do your work walk and talks at work. You can walk longer when you park the car. You can go up the stairs. You can take that few minutes to just go outside and do a walk. You can bring your kids along and make sure that you're going outside with them. You can play with them. You can enjoy family outings and walks and hikes depending on ages. So I think you can bring it in. You just have to again ask, how do I want to be there? It's definitely possible. You have to work hard at it, but you cannot store it up. Charlene, I would love to think you can store up that, but you can't. I'm going to throw out this idea. What if this wasn't so hard? What if you could look at the joy in moving? What if you thought, okay, I get to sit inside and play games on a gorgeous day on the computer, or I bring the family out and we go on a walk in nature. If we're so lucky that we have that, or we find that, and we go discover all the bugs we can find, all the new flowers, all the plants that we don't know, identify the trees. What if we have fun games outside? Everything from dodgeball to, playing, going to the swing set and playing with your kids, not watching them, but going and playing with them, running around with them. So
Interacting with life, it sounds like.
absolutely. So what if you thought about life like this as joyful versus work or effort? That's why I sometimes don't like the word exercise. I'm an exercise physiologist, but what brings you joy when you move your body? Is it dance? Put on some music and dance.
I
Is it so bring that into your life? Yeah, I like to dance. That's my thing too. So bring it into your life and reframe this idea of this being hard to being that I love this. I want to bring it in. What's happening today? What am I doing today? And the same thing with eating. How can I eat this plant-forward diet where I bring lots of fruits and vegetables and good grains and things that are bountiful? If you eat fish or meat, how do I make good choices there? Can I do on the creative side? Bring your kids into cooking, maybe batch cook on a weekend, cook big pots of stew or soups or whatever, freeze it, put it in the fridge. You have it for a couple nights, make your life easier. There are a lot of ways that we can make this much more of a positive thing versus it being an obligation that we don't want to do. Because if we look at it as an obligation, it will be an obligation and we will struggle to make sure that happens.
Yeah,
So I'm just imploring people or throwing out the idea, what if you turn this on your head and thought about this in a completely different way?
I love it. I love bringing joy and fun and family and gathering. And
Yeah.
then it doesn't even seem like it's work anymore, right? It doesn't even seem
Yeah.
like it's work. And I think that's the
Mhm.
key thing that my takeaway. So one final thing, Nancy, what are yours? I mean, you like to dance. I like to dance. It sounds like you look like you are an outdoors person from the photos that you sent.
Hi.
I
How
love
did you get?
What's your favorite thing? As we close our session, what is your favorite self-care things that you do?
Well, I told you about getting in my garden. I love getting in my garden. So that's my peaceful place. I also have a yoga practice. So those two are my big stress management activities where I'm really in flow and peaceful. I love the outdoors and I worked in the outdoors for a long time before I kind of turned to the world I'm working in now. So I come alive in nature. So it's a walk, it's a hike, it's a snowshoe, it's a cross country ski, it's a kayak.
Wow.
It's just
You
being
do
out
all
there.
outdoors.
Yeah, I just find such joy there. So there's not much I don't like doing outside.
Mm,
And so that's a great joy. And then I used to, and still do when I can, dance.
yeah.
And
What
I
kind of
used,
dance?
I love everything from swing, West Coast swing
Mm,
to Lindy and things like that. But I got into Argentine tango 15 years ago,
oh,
and I
wow.
love the music. And I've danced at a pretty high level there. And then I just put on music at home, like I'll put on some swing, or I'll put on some old Beatles, or I'll put on, some Van Morrison the other night. And I just move. It's like what I do, and I'll just move around. I'll take literally one song and say, I'm just going to move to it tonight. And I do that. So those are the things I do.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you heard it, folks, from our expert.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not so complicated. It can be so simple and
Mm.
enjoyable. And Nancy, thank you so much for
Oh,
our
you're so
very
welcome.
rich discussion. I hope you all took something away from this conversation. And I feel like now you've reignited that passion for my dancing again.
Yeah. Go do some salsa tonight. You look like a salsa gal.
I love to dance, like just move the body. Actually, I want to try to do line dancing in our local
Oh, yeah.
um, country bar here. We'll see, but I'm excited. I'm excited.
That's so much fun, line dancing and Zumba. That's a great way to get your exercise, right? Go to a
Yes,
Zumba class.
exactly. Thank you. I
Thank you
appreciate
as
you. I
well.
appreciate our conversation and very nice to talk with you.
It's been absolutely lovely. I wish everyone the very best. And wow, it's been a pleasure.
Bye bye, everyone.